Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's get started. I don't have any updates about the final projects. Any questions about details of physics engines I can help with? Nope. Okay. All right. So we are going to finish our discussion today about collective robotics. How do we go about automatically designing autonomous machines that coordinate their actions, or if implicit signaling and coordination is not sufficient, are able to communicate amongst themselves explicitly, if it's useful. So we're going to see today in lecture 21 the evolution of communication. Okay. Couple of new items in this experiment, which I introduced last time. This is the first time that we've seen gendered agents. We have a total of 1,600 agents that are operating on a toroid like before. In this case, we're going to be operating with a discrete grid. So the male and female agents can move from one point to the other. There are going to be different sensor motor capabilities for the two groups. The quote-unquote females are going to be deaf and immobile. They do not move, but they can emit signals into their environment. Males are blind. They cannot see, but they can hear. They cannot signal, and they are mobile. Seems like a whole bunch of arbitrary choices. This particular experiment the investigators were investigating a bio-inspired approach to evolutionary robotics. So they're incorporating various aspects from different species, and they're setting up a situation, as we'll see in a moment, in which communication may or may not evolve. Okay. Something that is familiar for all of these 1,600 agents, each one is going to be equipped with a neural network controller. The cognitive architecture of the neural network controllers for the males is identical to the cognitive architecture for the neural network controller of the females. In all cases, every agent has 3 layers in its neural network: a layer of sensor neurons, a layer of hidden neurons, and a layer of motor neurons. We have synaptic connections between input to hidden, hidden to hidden, hidden to hidden, and hidden to output. Same thing down here. The moment we see a hidden layer and recurrent connections, what does that tell us? Memory, if it's useful. Okay. The sensor neurons and the motor neurons are going to play different roles in the females and males because they have complementary and different sensor motor abilities. Let's have a look at the female network, which is up here. I apologize for the small font. It might be difficult to read back here. At every time step of the simulations we're going to see in a moment, the values that are supplied to the input layer of the female's neural network is the position and orientation of the closest male in her visual field. The females can see. This is their visual field. Wherever a female is, she can see up to 2 units to her west, east, north, and south. So if a male enters her visual range, the relative position of that male the relative position and orientation of that male will be fed into the input layer of the female's neural networks. She can see. In this example here, for this particular female, there is a male that is to her southeast, and that male is facing south. That information is fed into the input layer up here. Those directions, the relative positions and headings are binarized. We don't need to worry about the details about how. So like your robot with binary touch sensors, this neural network is also receiving binary values that are dictated by what the males are doing in her visual range. In the case of this particular female here, there are 2 males within her visual range. The relative position and heading of the closest male is what's supplied to this female's input layer of her neural network controller. So far, so good? Okay. At each time step of the simulation, then we propagate those input values through the neural network in the way that we've seen many times before. And the values arriving at the output layer for the female are translated into her mating call. The females are immobile, but they can see and they signal. So they do not move, but they emit a mating call, which is a binary vector. So there's an activation function sitting inside of these motor neurons, which binarizes these values. So the mating call of all the females we're going to see in this study is simply a binary vector. Okay. The male network, which again has the identical cognitive architecture, the input layer of the male network is the mating call of the closest female to that male if the male is within her range. So for example, in the case of this particular male here, this male is actually in hearing distance of two females. This male, in this particular experiment, they would flip a coin, and this male would either hear this female or this female. Let's assume we flip a coin and it's heads. So whatever the output mating call is of this female, that binary vector is copied into the input layer of that male's neural network controller. Males can hear. So far, so good? Okay. And if a male is outside of any female's visual range, like this male and this male, the input to the neural network controller for this male is all zeros. Same for this male. So far, so good? Question?
What was the purpose of making some of them like deaf and blind?
What is the purpose? Again, it seems like an arbitrary choice. There's a lot of biologically inspired terminology here. Deaf, immobile, signaling, mating call. Where do you think this is all going? It's okay if you're not sure yet.
They evolve the actual signals?
The title for this study is The Evolution of Communication. Let me finish the output layer of the male network, and a couple pieces might start to fall into place. The male hears, if it's within hearing distance of a female, hears a mating call. As always, we propagate the values, the input values arriving at the input layer for the male neural network controller. We propagate it from the input layer to the hidden layer, and then from the hidden layer down to the output layer. And the output layer for the male contains 4 neurons. And again, I apologize for the small font, but you can see down here, they are not binarizing the output layer. They're just leaving the raw values that arrive at these output neurons, the raw weighted sum. There are 4 motor neurons for the males, and those 4 motor neurons are associated with the 4 actions that the males can perform, or motor primitives, which we've heard of before. Males can either stay still, they can move 1 unit forward in the direction they're facing, or they can turn 90 degrees to their left, or they can turn 90 degrees to their right. In this cartoon example down here, I don't know why they didn't just draw the 4th motor neuron. We've got a value of -4 in the first neuron, 22 in the second neuron, and 78 in the 4th neuron. We look at those four values, and we determine which is the larger. In this case, it's 78. So the 4th motor neuron has the highest magnitude value. That 4th motor neuron is associated with the 4th action. So this particular male at the next time step will turn 90 degrees to its right. If we took the same male with exactly the same set of synaptic weights, and that male heard a different binary vector in its input layer, you might get a different distribution of values at the output layer, and perhaps now the second neuron would have the highest magnitude value, and that second motor neuron is associated with the second action, which would be move forward. So males hear and are mobile. They also don't signal. All they do is act. Okay. Any guesses about where all this is going now? We've seen some parts of this experiment so far. Some are familiar. We've got a whole bunch of agents. They're all being controlled by a neural network. We update that neural network at every time step. So the females sense, think, and act. The males sense, think, and act. What's the missing piece or pieces we haven't introduced yet?
Well, we don't have a fitness function.
We don't have a fitness function yet. Any guesses about what the fitness function might be, given all the loaded terminology?
Is it, sorry, me? Okay. Is it just that is it that the fitness function is a male reaching a given female?
That's exactly what it is. In all of the evolutionary algorithms and evolutionary robotics experiments we've seen in this course so far, reproduction is kind of glossed over. We have a population of vectors or trees like we saw last time with our virtual lions. We've got a whole population of things. We have a fitness function that assigns values to all of those things. We delete the ones with low values. We make randomly modified copies of the survivors with higher values. And sometimes we combine genetic material from the survivors when we randomly modify that genetic material. It drives biologists up the wall whenever they hear an evolutionary algorithm. There are many, many of those details that are obviously have no counterpart in reality. As far as we know, we are not trying to satisfy a fitness function. We propagate our genetic material based on mating and producing offspring. So in this evolutionary robotics experiment we're going to see today, it's an older experiment from '91, but arguably it's more biologically realistic than any other study we're going to see in this course, and pretty much in anything that's been published since. They put quite a bit of effort into this study to making the evolutionary part as biologically realistic as possible. Make sense? Okay, so there is actually no fitness function really. There is a population. We've got 800 females and 800 males. Males that find females, those male-female pairs are going to produce more offspring than males and females that do not find each other. So what do you think is going to happen to the males and females that do not find each other? They're going to die off. And over evolutionary time, what do you think generally is going to happen? Males and females that are able to find each other produce offspring that can find each other. They're going to inherit that ability to find members of the opposite sex. That's it. There's no locomotion, no object manipulation in this study whatsoever. If you're a male and there is evolutionary pressure acting on you to find female mates, and if you're a female and there is evolutionary pressure acting on you to attract mates to you with mating calls, what is a generally good strategy for the females and males over evolutionary time? To have meaningful mating calls. A random female neural network, when supplied with information about nearby males, will emit a random binary vector. Strictly speaking, that binary vector has no meaning yet. It's randomly generated by a random neural network, a neural network with random synaptic weights. You take that semantic free, that binary vector that has no meaning associated with it, and you plug it into a male neural network, which also has random synaptic weights. The male is going to move at random. What is the meaning of that mating call? There's no meaning yet, right? Okay, so that's where we're going to start with. We're going to distribute 800 males and 800 females at random on our toroid. The females are going to start emitting random signals, and males are going to hear those signals. Shouldn't even call them signals. It's going to start emitting sound. The males are going to hear those sounds, and they're going to do something at random. We're starting with no language, no meaning, no communication whatsoever. The question that these investigators asked was, will communication evolve, yes or no, in this very simple study? And if it does evolve, what does that communication look like? Okay. Again, since we're talking about this study, you can probably guess that the answer to the first question, will communication evolve? The answer is yes. Okay. So let's have a look. Okay. So mating itself, let's talk about that. We sort of already figured this out. So if a male, as it's moving about on this discrete grid, turning left, moving one unit forward, turning right, turning right, turning right, moving forward, staying still, and so on. If a male ever moves into the same cell as a female, we take each male and female parent, we make a modified copy of each of them. There's no sexual recombination here, so this is kind of a strange thing. Lots of biological detail in this study, except kind of the whole point of mating, which is to combine genetic material. In this case, we take the male parent, the female parent, we make randomly modified copies of their controllers. So now we have a male offspring, the son, and we have a female offspring, the daughter. The male and the daughter overwrite some other male and female elsewhere on the toroid at random. So some other male is chosen, that male is deleted, and the position of that recently vacated cell, the son, the male offspring, is copied into that cell, and a random female is chosen, she is deleted, and the daughter is placed into that recently vacated cell. We then take the male parent and the female parent out of the cell that they're co-occupying and place them at random locations on the toroid, into random empty cells. That's a mating event. Pretty straightforward. So far, so good? So that's it. There's no fitness function. Let's see what happens. Okay. A very old study, so we're going to have to look at tables today, not the most interesting thing to look at. We're going to learn how to read these tables. In this first study, they restricted the width of the output layer for the female network to just 3 neurons, and they restricted the width of the input layer for the male network to 3 neurons. That means that any female could emit any one of 8 quote-unquote mating calls. She can sing the song 000 or sing the song 001, 010, and so on. Make sense? Okay. So they put 1,600 agents at random on the toroid, and then they just started to update the simulation. At every time step of the simulation, they evaluated all 1,600 neural network controllers, and the result of those 1,600 evaluations was that a female emitted one of these 8 songs at random. These are random neural networks, and males tended to do things at random. They updated the simulation again, second time step, evaluated all 1,600 neural networks again, and again, and again, and again. During any one of those simulation time steps, if a male and female entered the same cell, they reproduced, and they just ran the simulation forever. There's no generations in this experiment. We're not starting the simulation over again and rerunning the simulation. It's just one long simulation in which evolution proceeds. Quite different from what we've seen so far. Make sense? Okay. So this snapshot is the state of the world after 100 time steps of the simulation. During those 100 time steps, they looked across all 800 females, and you can imagine, on average, those 800 females over those 100 time steps tended to emit these 8 songs with equal probability, right? There's no reason why one female would emit one, the females would emit one song more than the other. Every time a female emitted a song and there was a male nearby, they looked to see what the male did in response to hearing that song. And they looked at that across all 800 males over the 100 time steps. What happened in all the cases in which a male heard the song 000? What did the males do on average? Turn right 38 times, they moved forward 25 times, turned left 9 out of times, stood still 28 times. During the same time period, the same 800 males, 19 of them moved forward when they heard this, 25 of them turned right when they heard this, and so on. What are the males doing on average in response to the females during these first 100 time steps on the toroid? Is it what you expect? Yes, why? They're moving randomly, right? They're controlled by random neural networks. Pretty much a quarter of the time, males do one of their 4 actions. That's it, right? So this is a sanity check. This is what you would expect from all the descriptions we've given of the experiment so far. No evolution of mating, no evolution of communication, no nothing yet. This is the starting point. This is after 5,000 time steps of the same simulation. What's changed? Something's starting to happen.
They almost never stand still.
They almost never stand still. Why not? They meaning the males. Males never stand still. They have evolved to not stand still anymore.
Standing still doesn't get them during the female.
Absolutely. As a male, you can be guaranteed that if you stay in the same cell, you're not going to find a female. Females do not move. They do not teleport. If you want to mate, you got to move. What else is happening?
It looks like they spend most of the time just kind of moving in a straight line, so they only turn like a couple times to sort of route themselves accordingly.
Most of the time, they're moving forward. As a male, turning 90 degrees to the left or 90 degrees to the right, you're also guaranteed not to find a female. For better or for worse, there's a lot of metaphors to human males and females in this. I will not crack any jokes in this lecture here. You can draw your own conclusions. For the males, at this point, they have evolved to go forward, not stay still, not turn left, not turn right. That's the best thing for the males to do under these conditions. What do we mean by these conditions? Is this the best possible thing for the males to do? We're only talking about the males so far. This table doesn't tell us anything about any evolution that's occurred among the female population. Has anything occurred among the female population, do you think, at this point in evolutionary time? I see a couple of nods and a couple of shakes of the head, so a little bit of disagreement. Thoughts?
There's slightly different distributions for turning right and turning left, implying that the signals had some bearing on whether they turn right or turn left.
Maybe. If you look across these 3 columns, the distributions are not identical. Now, that could just be noise in the data, right? This is still very early on in the evolutionary history of this toroidal world, as we'll see in a moment. We're still in primordial times here. So maybe it's just noise. Maybe the females have not evolved to signal yet, but there are some differences. So maybe certain songs are starting to influence male behavior. Maybe. So far, so good? Here's 7,500 time steps into the evolutionary history of this planet. What's happening? If the females were starting to evolve signaling, it's lost on these particular 8,000 males. They are clearly now ignoring any difference, if there is any, in the distribution of signals emitted by the females. Go straight. I know one of these investigators, but I never got around to ask him. I would imagine when they saw this data, they were probably pretty depressed. This does not look like the kind of place in which the evolution of communication is going to occur. Looks like a failure to me. 15,000 time steps later. So we've jumped further into the future. What's happened?
They learn to associate certain signals with turning left or right.
They've learned to associate certain signals with turning left or right. Almost perfect. No learning going on, just a reminder that learning means that during the lifetime of an individual, its synaptic weights are changing. This is evolution. So throughout the lifetime of a male or a female, however long they live on this grid, their synaptic weights never change. So they're evolving, the males are evolving to selectively do certain actions when they hear certain songs. Again, these tables are only reporting statistics about the males. It doesn't say anything about the statistics of what the females are doing. Can you guess? What do you think the females are doing on average? If you were to look around this time across all 800 females for 100, 1,000 time steps, do you think the distribution of these songs would be uniform? Probably not. Why not?
Most of the time, the females would probably want the males to go straight until they're like in alignment with them.
Maybe the females might want them to move straight. We'll mentally put scare quotes on everything as we go, but generally speaking, probably yes. There is obviously an evolutionary benefit for the males, presumably, to turn right when they hear 101 and to turn left when they hear 110. That seems to be an evolutionary benefit for the males. So there must also be some evolutionary benefit for the females as well, which is, for all we know, it's for the females to emit 101 under certain conditions. There must be certain conditions of the males relative to the females in which females telling the males to turn right makes sense, in the sense of it will bring the male to the female. And from the female's perspective, there are also situations in which it makes sense for her to emit the song 110. There are conditions under which she, quote unquote, knows to emit 110, and she, quote unquote, knows that will cause the male to turn left, and that will likely lead to a reproduction event. Okay. What conditions are these? Good observation. Here's an example of, at this point in evolutionary time, what's going on. So just to summarize what we've just seen, at the very beginning, as we would expect, males wander at random and females signal at random. We should probably just say emit sound. Signal implies that there's some meaning to the sound. At this point, there is no meaning associated with these 8 binary vectors. Males that stood still or turned left or turned right and stayed in place tended to go extinct and were outcompeted and out-evolved by males that evolved to move in straight lines and ignore any potential signals. However, after a significant period of time, the evolution of communication started to occur. Males started to evolve to turn when they were on the same row or column as the female. So here's our female sitting down here, and they've shaded in same row, same column for the female. They noted, the investigators noted, at around this particular time, when a male moved into a female's territory and came into contact with any of these shaded cells, whenever a male entered the same column or the same row as a female, she tended to emit one of these two signals much more often than she would otherwise. Remember that the females can see. They know where the male is relative to themselves and orientation. Okay. That started to happen for some of these shaded cells, and then over evolutionary time, around this time, females started to emit those signals more often for more and more of these shaded cells. Is this the best that the males and females can do you think? What's the optimal strategy here? It's a very simple experiment, not a lot going on here. But it turns out that there is the potential for some relatively sophisticated collective dynamics here. Okay. Think about it. We'll come back to it. Okay. Let's just pause for a moment and have a look at some actual data. Again, I apologize for the quality of these graphics here. What we just looked at is the test experiment. This is their algorithm A, and we're going to look at a control, their algorithm B. You can think of this as A/B testing again. So again, I apologize. This is going to be hard to read here. Test is this particular curve here. And in test here, the horizontal axis is evolutionary time. Usually in all these experiments in this course we've looked at so far, evolutionary time on the horizontal axis is measured in the number of generations, the number of times we update the state of all the individuals in the population. In this experiment, remember there's just one long simulation measured in time steps. So they ran this single simulation for 60,000 time steps. And on the vertical axis, they measured for all 800 males the average time between reproduction events. So at the beginning, way back at the beginning here, males found females on average after about 270 time steps. By the end, males were finding females on an average of 40 time steps. Clearly, the evolution of coordination between males and females has increased in this study. In the control experiment shown here, algorithm variant B, they made one change and one change only, which is that the males were deafened. When they copied the binary vector from the output layer of a female neural network controller into the input layer of a male neural controller, they permuted the binary values. So basically the male could hear, but it was garbled what the male was hearing, which means, of course, that what the male did was also garbled. Not surprisingly, by the end of evolution, these males that cannot hear very well, it takes them longer to find females. The difference between these two curves is proof that the males and females have evolved communication. The females have evolved the ability to quote unquote know when to emit what signal, and the males have evolved the ability to know what to do when they hear what signal. That obviously cannot happen in the control study because the males can't hear. Make sense? Seems pretty clear. What's going on here? During this period, the deafened males are actually doing better. How is this possible? How do we explain this? It's not noise, it's real. If they rerun this experiment over and over again with males that can hear and males that are deafened, during the early days of evolution, the deafened males tend to mate more often with females.
They can still evolve not to stand still, right?
They can still evolve to not stand still, which they do, like the males did that could hear. The males that could hear also evolved to not stand still. But there seems to be an actual advantage for the deafened males early on.
Is it like at first hearing actually like provides noise that stops it for like the randomness is detrimental at first until the hearing evolves to be effective?
The randomness, if it's detrimental, then this curve would be above this curve. These males are hearing garbled information, but they do better, at least for a little while. What's going on?
Is it like the idea that like before you can succeed, you have to fail? Like it's like they're trying to be more informed, but they just like don't know exactly what to do yet.
You're on the right track, right? There's something that's going on. They're obviously, the males that can hear are failing before they succeed, and actually the same for the females.
I think maybe the females haven't learned to signal correctly yet, so maybe they're all signaling differently and it's just providing information that isn't useful.
True, but again, that's also true in the original experiment. The females are starting to evolve the ability to signal. We got to try and explain why the deafened males have an advantage.
Because the only target, like the best they can do is to move constantly in a straight line. And it's a lot easier to do that if you do that for everything than if you have a bunch of different signals that you have to evolve specific behaviors for.
Absolutely, right? So this is an important reminder that communication, which our species is very good at and clearly has utility, it's useful. There's no free lunch. Everything comes at a cost. Communication and language is very costly from an evolutionary point of view. What do we mean by cost? What is the cost of communication?
It takes a really long time to get it right.
It takes a really long time to get it right. Why? Why does it take so long to evolve communication? It's not a trivial thing. We are not the only species that's capable of language, but there are few species on this planet that are, and arguably we're one of the better ones at it. It's not easy. Not easy in the sense that there's a cost. It takes evolution a very long time. Why? What specifically is so difficult about language?
There's kind of like two moving pieces, two things communicating, and then trying to make those communications uniform across like all of the different members of the population so that any member from like the females mating calls can be interpreted by like any member of the males.
Absolutely, right? You said it perfectly right at the beginning, right? There's two pieces of the puzzle in any communicating species. The emitters have to evolve to consistently emit signals under certain conditions, and the receivers have to evolve the ability to interpret those signals appropriately. Evolution has to get both pieces in place simultaneously. A little bit of both pieces in place simultaneously, and then evolution can improve on it from there, but you got to get both pieces at once. Any aspect of phenotype, any feature, any behavior that requires getting more than one thing right at once is obviously very difficult for evolution to do because mutations have to improve both things simultaneously. Most mutations, as we've seen, and you've probably seen firsthand in your assignments, mutations tend to break things, right? And if you're trying to establish or improve two things at once, the probability of a mutation doing that is exceedingly low. It's very, very low. So just to concretize this idea, let's go back to this specific case of one female who has started to evolve the ability to emit a signal that causes males to turn left when any male comes into contact with any of these shaded cells. Otherwise, assume that that female emits the signal that means just go straight. So imagine this female is actually alternating between just two different songs, either go left or go straight. What should the males do under those conditions? They should listen and obey. Go straight, and when you get to one of these cells, turn left. A male coming into this female's territory from her northeast, traveling west. A male coming in this way, touches this cell, the female emits the signal, turn left. Let's assume the male obeys and does turn left. What does the female say next or sing next? What should she sing next? Go straight. Great. Mating event. Imagine another male, same situation, comes in from her northeast, traveling west, hits this cell. She says, go left, and the male turns right. The female probably says, your other right, your other left, right? There's no guarantee, and actually it's quite likely among 800 males that those males are going to interpret those signals differently, right? So for this female to produce enough female offspring that emit the right signals under the right conditions, she has to attract enough males to make that convention, that beginning of language, start to propagate through the population. It's going to take a large number of rare events for those kinds of things to happen. Make sense? This is yet another example of thinking about thinking is misleading. Language feels so easy to us. I'm talking, I see some of you writing. Even if you're not writing, I assume you're interpreting and understanding what I'm saying. Language is effortless for us. It is very difficult for the individual. It takes human children a very long time to master language, and there are relatively few species on this planet capable of language. It is by no means an easy feat.
Is it easier or more difficult to evolve like the emitter-receiver sort of structure versus one where both parties can emit and receive?
Great question. So in this case, receivers are only receivers, they're not emitters, and vice versa. That's a great question. I don't think anybody's tackled that. You could take this code base as a starting point and add some additional output neurons to the males so that they can also sing, and you could add some additional motor neurons to the females' neural networks to allow them to move and see what happens. Great idea. Hasn't been done yet. Okay.
So that conventions will emerge?
Conventions.
Are the conventions largely like a matter of historical chance? Like we saw one of the tables where turning left and turning right are associated with two signals.
Yes.
Are those two signals, did those just win out of chance? Could it be other two signals?
Great question. So conventions, right? So in this world, at this particular time, it seems that 101 means turn right and 110 means turn left. Is that a historical accident? Did that just happen based on mutations in the history of this population? Or is it not a convention? Is there something specific about 101? If we were to rewind the evolutionary tape for this experiment and go back to 16,000 random controllers and run it forward again, do you think you would always see 101 evolving to mean turn right? Of course not. Why would you? If we rewound our evolutionary type and ran it forward again, and we as a species rediscovered the concept of historical accident, would we always spell it HIST, or would we spell it? Of course not. Language is always the specific symbols that make up language are probably the best example of historical contingency in evolution or the development of culture. Completely arbitrary.
So in this case where it seems like the only kind of like three instructions that are really important is either move forward, turn left, or turn right, would this not have evolved quicker if the binary vector emitted was only like 2
Okay, great. So the investigators made some decisions here, like by setting the number of possible signals the females emitted. It took, in this case, 15,000 time steps for communication to start to evolve. Your question was, what would happen if we reran the evolutionary tape, but now females could only emit 4 possible songs? Only 2 motor neurons for the female and only 2 sensor neurons for the males. Would evolution of communication evolve earlier, later, or not at all? It's a great question. We're actually going to see they did a second experiment in which they did exactly this. They restricted the songs that the females could sing. We'll see in a moment what happens. But before we see what happens, what do you think happens? We're restricting, if we restrict the number of songs that the females can sing and that males can hear, we're restricting the communication channel. There's only 4 possible things that the emitters can say to the receivers or send to the receivers. What about if we widened the communication channel? What if we expanded the output, female output and male input layer to 4 neurons? There's now 2 to the 4 possible songs that females can emit. Will communication evolve earlier, later, not at all? Thoughts? It's not so obvious, I don't think.
I feel like intuitively, like you'd be kind of technically losing information if you snip that signal, but on the same hand, it seems like a sort of combinatorics problem. Like the more potential signals there are, the harder it would be to like pick up actual signals and to evolve that.
Great point, right? You said losing information, right? We haven't talked too much about information in the Shannon sense in this class yet. Information meaning what is the number of possible things that can, in theory, be communicated. In this case, there are 8 possible things that can be communicated. Clearly, that was enough for behavior to evolve here. Given this distribution, what are the fewest number of songs do you think females should have access to in order to evolve communication? I see a lot of people holding up 3, right? Turn left, turn right, go forward. Could we get away with 2? Why 2? Yes?
Well, because if they move, the males seem to evolve to move forward, like regardless of female signal, they know that, well, not know, but moving forward is advantageous to them, and so they don't really need to be told. They only need to know when to turn right or left.
True. Good point, right? So the males instinctually at this point, and this is not historical accident. If you rewind the evolutionary tape and run it again, the males generally will evolve to move forward, right? There is a strong universal reason for them to, all other things being equal, move forward. You got it almost right. There's this one quirk of the experiment, which is that when a male enters a female territory, the males can't help but hear whatever she's singing. So even 000 is going to influence what the males do. So there is implicit selection pressure for the females to emit a signal that the males interpret as go forward. Right? The males can't close their ears and just go forward. So the female has, one of the songs she has to evolve the ability to sing is something that causes or keeps the males moving forward. We need one other, which is to turn. Do we need the females to say turn left and turn right?
No, especially because it's a toroid, so if they just turn in one direction, eventually they'll wrap around.
Yeah, but it's a very big toroid.
Okay.
It's massive, right? 40,000. So if a female sings to a male and that male leaves her signaling territory, it's unlikely that that male is going to come back around anytime soon. There's 40,000 cells on this toroid.
Is it because if you turn left enough times, you're gonna end up going right?
Absolutely. I had a great uncle who came from the old country years ago. He learned to drive when he was middle-aged. I grew up in a big city. He learned to drive in a big city, was terrified. I remember as a kid driving the car with him. This was not a fun experience. He came up with a great strategy, which is just never turn left. Everywhere he went, everywhere we drove in the car, in a grid, like a huge big city, you can, in theory, get anywhere you want to go by making a right. And in the Western Hemisphere, driving conventions are turning right is less scary than turning left. Took us forever to get certain places, but I always thought it was kind of crazy as a kid, and then 30 years later, I learned about this experiment. I thought maybe not so crazy after all. The females and males can get away with evolving a language in which there are just two words, go forward and turn X. It doesn't matter whether X evolves to be left or right. If a male enters this territory and the female only knows to sing the song turn left, how should she use the two songs that she has? A male is coming in from her northwest, traveling east, and hits this cell. What does she say, or what does she sing?
Left, forward.
The male is facing this way. So left, male's facing north. She sings left again. The male is facing west. She sings left a third time. Now the male is facing south, and now she sings go forward, right? In theory, you can get away with two symbols in this language. How does that compare, do you think, to females evolving the ability to sing three different songs? Go straight, turn left, turn right. Is there an advantage, an evolutionary advantage to these two languages?
I would expect that the simplified one would evolve faster, but the average number of moves would be slightly higher because there's a couple extra instructions that need to be received before they can reach the female.
Absolutely.
So they can just turn right directly.
That's it. The left forward language probably evolves quicker because there's fewer things that there's only two things the females need to evolve the ability to emit. And there's only two things that the males need to evolve to interpret correctly. But it's an inefficient language because in the example we just looked at, the male and the female waste two time steps in which it's guaranteed that they are not going to mate. Yeah?
Wouldn't it be kind of less likely if we're starting with like random probability of each thing? Wouldn't it be less likely to land on three lefts in a row than it would be to, I feel like saying that it would arrive at the solution faster. Like the ability to turn right is actually pretty unlikely though.
Got it. Possibly. It might actually be harder for the females to evolve that because there's a greater number of conditions she's got to keep right in order for the mating event to happen. Same thing with the male, right? So maybe yes, maybe no. A lot of the research questions that arise from this experiment, which we're discussing, it's not so obvious, yeah? Which makes, from my perspective, makes this evolution of language interesting, evolution of communication interesting. Very, very simple setup, but a lot of rich dynamics can start to occur here. Okay, all right. We just talked about this, I think, but let's just go through it here. We've got a female down here. Again, I apologize on the very small font here. There's a male down here outside of her visual range. She cannot see this male. She is singing 0, 0, 0 here in panel A. At the next time step, panel B, the male, as males tend to do in this world, moves forward and enters her visual range. She sees the male and switches from singing 0, 0, 0 to singing 1, 0, 1. In panel C, it seems like the male is ignoring that signal. The male continues doing what he was doing before, which is moving straight in a northerly direction. In panel D, the female suddenly switches from singing 1, 0, 1 to singing 0, 0, 1. And the male's behavior immediately changes. The male heard and interpreted that signal as turn right, and the female in panel A goes back to singing 1, 0, 1. What's going to happen at the next time step, which is not shown in this figure? The male is going to move straight because we know that this male moves straight when he hears 1, 0, 1. Okay, a successful mating event. Here's the example we just saw, we just talked about a minute ago. Male entering from the northwest, from the female's northwest perspective, traveling east. The female is emitting 101, 011, 101, 101, and the male turns left. She keeps singing 101, and the male keeps turning left, turns left again. When the male turns left for this third time, she changes back to 011, which the male interprets as go forward. Okay. All right. So we have seen now that at least when the females can sing 8 different songs, the evolution of communication can occur. But it's now occurred to us that there are different possible languages that can evolve under these conditions. So the second experiment we're going to look at now is something you mentioned a few minutes back. What happens if we restrict the communication channel of the female so that she can only emit 4 possible songs, and the males can hear those 4 possible songs? So we're going to rewind the evolutionary tape. We're going to go back to 16,000 random agents. They all have random neural networks. We're restricting the output layer of the female, and we're restricting the input layer of the male, and we leave everything else the same and start it up. Okay. This is what things look like at the very first time step in the simulation. Takes a little bit to wrap your mind around what's going on here. You'll notice in all of these little bunches of numbers here, there's a number to the left of the colon and a number to the right of the colon. Let's have a look at the number that's to the right of the colon. There are 4 digits. These 4 digits correspond to the 4 possible songs that the females can emit. In this case, again, the males have 4 possible actions. So it turns out that there were a few males that whenever they heard the first of the 4 songs, whenever they heard the song 00, the males did 0, which is stay still. The second digit, when males heard this second song 01, the males did 0 also, which is go forward. And some of these males, when they heard the third song, they did 1, which is go forward. And some of these males, whenever they heard the 4th song, they did 3, which is turn right. There were 4 males, the number to the left of this colon. Among all 800 males, there were 4 of them that did this. So each grouping of numbers here is representing a particular subset of males. And the number to the right of the colon tells you exactly what those males did under all 4 conditions. Make sense? Everybody see how to read this? Okay, so let's just check our intuition. Let's jump at random to another one. Let's have a look at this one here. So in this first time step, there were 11 males that did this distribution of things, these things, when they heard those 4 female songs. There were 6 males that stood still whenever they heard the first of the 3 songs and went forward when they heard the 4th song. Again, I apologize for the small font, but if you scan your eyes over all the numbers to the left of the colons, you'll notice that across this entire table, there's a more or less uniform distribution of things that males do in response to female songs. Everybody see that? Okay. All right. Here's what things look like after 8,000 time steps. What's happening? Again, this is only showing us changes in behaviors among the males. Doesn't really tell us anything about changes among the behaviors of the females.
It seems like there are some competing conventions.
Competing conventions, okay. How are there competing conventions here? There are competing conventions here. What are they?
Like, on the right, there are a bunch of, like, I know that you can, not necessarily it's spaceful, but you can see like there are kind of similarities between some of them.
There's similarities. At this point, at the beginning, there's no male tribes, right? All males are doing all the different things you could possibly imagine. The one thing that should obviously jump out to you 8,000 time steps later is the male behavior tends to be much more uniform. The ways in which males respond to female songs has shrunk. I've highlighted the largest grouping here. What's going on among this tribe of 547 males?
It looks like they evolved to just always move forward except for one signal where they just turn right.
Exactly. So you'll notice to the right of the colon here, there are 3 ones. So for 3 of the 4 songs, the males go forward. And for the second female song, these particular males only turn right. These males, like my great uncle, they never turn left.
Also, none of the big ones, with I guess the exception of the 74 to the right of it, like the 323 and a lot of the 70s only have 2. Like most of them aren't using all 3.
Some of them are using 2, or using 2 of the 4 motor primitives that are available to the males. Some are using 3. Some are using 2 or responding to 2 out of the 4 female songs, and some are responding to 3 out of the 4 female songs. Where are the males that ignore female songs altogether? Are they on here? What would the 4 digits to the right of the colon look like for the group of males that ignore what females sing? 1111. Does anyone see 1111 on here? Where is it? 4 above. Here we go. Here we go. Thank you very much. Right. So these males, no matter which of the 4 songs they hear, they always go forward. There's 70 of them. Among these 2 groups, among these 70 males and these 547 males, who do you think's got a sunnier future? It's already starting to become obvious, right? These males. Okay, should we keep going? All right, let's fast forward through evolutionary time. Here's the state of play after the same simulation 10,000 time steps later. There is now a growing group up here. I'm going to flip back and forth between 8,000 time steps, 10,000 time steps, 8,000, 10,000, 8,000, 10,000. Keep an eye out for the 1113. What's happening?
They've evolved kind of similarly to the 613, except they've used the 4th song as the turn right.
We've got a competing conventions thing going on. There's this growing number of groups of males that change what they do based on the 4th song. And there's a very large group of males that's been around for a while now that changes what they do, or at least they suppress their default behavior, which is to go forward when they hear the 2nd song.
This is a little off topic, but is this like process of mapping the songs to like a behavior, is that grounding?
Is that grounding? Great point. Yeah. What do you think? Is this a version of grounding from the male's perspective? Is this an example of grounding the symbols of language, 00, 01, 10, and 10, in the soil of sensor motor experience?
I mean, the language is their sensor experience, because all they can do is hear.
All they can do is hear and act based on what they hear. they can't help but ground the symbols in sensor motor experience, because for the males, and actually also for the females, it's a matter of life and death. Yes, absolutely. If you were to ask one of these males what 0, 1 means, the male is not going to say, well, 0, 1 tends to come before 1, 1 and 1, 0, 1 whenever I encounter a female. That's what ChatGPT and the non-embodied AI models do. They'll tell you what a symbol means by telling you that that symbol tends to come after a bunch of other symbols. It's not grounded in the soil of sensor motor experience. If you were to be able to ask a male what 0, 1 means, the male would tell you, it causes me to want to turn left, and when I go with what feels right, I tend to produce offspring. Yes, it's definitely grounded in sensor motor experience. Great observation. Okay, so again, we're looking at only what the males do, but we should be able to infer, you should be able to infer from this, that the fact that there are so many of these males around must mean there's an evolutionary advantage to this behavior and also an evolutionary advantage to this behavior. Therefore, there must be two groups of females. One group knows how to attract and mate with the 1-3-1-1 males, and another group of females that knows how to attract and mate with the 1-1-1-3 males. Everybody see that? Okay. Is this it? We now see not just the evolution of communication, we see the evolution of two different languages simultaneously inside the same evolving population. There are no mountain ranges on the toroid. It's not that these two groups are physically separated. They're moving and mixing all the time. They just don't literally speak the same language. Evolutionary pressure is continuing to act on the males and females. There is exerting evolutionary pressure. Is there anything else that the males and females, or the male and female descendants of these males and females might evolve to do?
So I see one of the populations, the one right to the right of the 613, also has the ability to turn left.
Okay.
But one thing I noticed that was kind of interesting is in the last slide, it actually lost population moving forward.
This one. There were 74 members of this male tribe. Now there's only 42. Another auspicious number.
So normally I'd say that like the next step would be to evolve the ability to turn in the other direction, but clearly that doesn't seem to be something that evolution is pushing forward.
Not at this point in time. Yep, good observation. This group seems promising. The males turn right in response to signal 2 and left in response to signal 4. And we know that there are two groups of females that are emitting songs 2 and 4 because that seems to be working for these males. And song number 4 tends to be working for this group of males. If you were a male descendant in this population at this time, from your perspective as a male, what might you want to do?
You might want a response that is 1-3-1-3 so that you can turn on both.
If you're a female descendant in this population at this time, what do you want to be doing? You're a female among females, some of whom know to emit signal 2 under certain conditions, and another separate group of females that know how to emit song 4 under a different set of conditions. What evolutionary pressure is now starting to build on the female population?
The ability to do both.
The ability to do both. At this point in time, there is evolutionary pressure. There are two subpopulations that have evolved in this larger population. They're both monolinguists. The males and females in both subgroups speak the same language. Let's see what happens. Okay, 10,000 12,000. At 12,000, we've got 1313 males. Somebody mentioned 1313 males. They seem to be responding correctly to both female groups. How do we know that? We know that because these males turn right in response to song 2. And this big male tribe tells us down here, indirectly, that there are females that know how to sing song 2 to attract males that turn right when they hear song 2. There's potential here for these males. And these males also, quote unquote, know that there is another group of females that know when to sing song 4 to attract males that turn right when they hear that song. So this is 12,000 time steps. Have a look at this particular tribe here. 20 members of this tribe at time 10,000, 128 members of this tribe at 12,000. What's happening to the other two monolingual tribes? I'm going to advance this slide a couple more slides. What do you think is going to happen? Who are you rooting for here?
They're probably gonna lose numbers as the 1313 gets bigger.
Here's 14,000, 16,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. If you're not on Duolingo, I would highly recommend that you do. It's one takeaway from this lesson today.
Is it pretty rare that when you're training that it even an example like this that it actually converges on one result?
What would happen if you rewound the evolutionary tape and you ran this experiment all over again? This particular experiment in which there's only 4 possible female signals. What do you think would happen? Would the entire population evolve on multilingual receivers and multilingual emitters? This is another item here, right? We know that the males have converged. What's going on with the females? There's one uniform population of multilingual females. All 1,600 females are multilingual. There is no longer a population of this many monolinguists and this many other monolinguists. How do we know that that's the case? We're inferring that from this data.
Don't we not know that though? Because if the bilingual males can respond.
The bilingual males can respond correctly. They can mate with monolingual females of one group and monolingual females of the other group. And they can mate with any bilingual females if there are any. That's clearly an advantage for the males. Is there an advantage for the females to evolve to be bilingual? Why?
Because until the male population does converge, it's going to increase their mating pool.
Absolutely. At this point in which every single male is bilingual, now among the female population, it doesn't matter. You can only emit song 1 and 2, or only emit song 1 and 4, and you'll, with equal probability, attract these particular males. But during this evolutionary period, you're more likely as a female to be able to attract these males, or these males, or these males if you speak 2 languages. A monolingual female during this evolutionary period can only capture males from one of these 3 groups, not from all 3 groups. There is selection pressure acting on both the female and male populations at this point, not just to evolve communication, but to evolve to be bilingual in this case. Okay, we've got 1 minute left in class. Back to your question. What do you think would happen if we rewound the evolutionary tape and ran it forward again? Would we get the evolution of monolinguists followed by the evolution of bilinguists?
I would guess probably yes, for the fact that it's the only way you would end up converging on monolinguists is there's just like one really dominant language.
Possibly. Possibly, but not quite. Look at what the males are doing. These incredibly fit males, and this is the only thing the males ever do. Is this the optimal solution for the males and the females? I see some of you shaking your heads no. Why not? How do you know this isn't optimal?
They can only turn in one direction.
They can only turn one direction. My great uncle strikes again. Good solution, but not an optimal solution. A lot of amazing things going on here, but evolution is a satisficer, not an optimizer. Evolution has converged on a pretty good solution, but it's inefficient. It would be great if males actually were able to turn left and right in response to a lot of different signals. Yeah? Is our language the most efficient language there is? Could I have communicated everything I communicated to you this morning in less than 75 minutes? Probably yes. I don't know how, but probably yes.
Is there any evolutionary pressure to minimize the number of steps taken?
Is there any evolutionary pressure? In this experiment, absolutely there is evolutionary pressure to reduce the number of time steps between mating events. Absolutely. There's very strong evolutionary pressure in this experiment. Evolution of language, and language, obviously a fascinating topic. We could teach a whole class on this. We're going to put a pin in this for now. You have a quiz due tonight. You're working on your final project. Have a good rest of your week. See you on Tuesday.